Rise of the Beasts came out a couple weeks ago, and I've got some things to say. It's not that it's a bad movie. It had its moments. I enjoyed a lot of it. I had some genuine smiling moments in this movie. But it had some issues. Now, what I don't want to do is rehash what's been said 500,000 times on the internets and the Facebooks and the YouTubes. There's been plenty said, and I don't need to rehash. I don't need to go back through all of the things that have been said countless times. Like the fact that it's called Rise of the Beasts, and we got basically 1.5 beasts. You call the movie Rise of the Beasts. In all of the marketing, you tease the Maximals, and then it turns out it wasn't even a tease because Cheetor and Rhinox, what you saw in the trailer, is basically what you got in the movie. Anyway, there's been plenty said about that. I'm not going to talk about it. Just like the CGI, the fact that it's pretty bad. Like, if you compare it to the first Transformers movie, the first Michael Bay movie, that was 16 years ago. And the CGI in that movie, maybe with a couple exceptions, the CGI in that movie is far better than the best CGI in Rise of the Beasts. It's embarrassing. You can tell when you watch the old movies, at least the first two, most of the third one, it kind of degrades over time. The time and care that they put into those movies, even the designs of the characters, you can tell, like, they were very purposeful about where they placed the vehicle mode parts on the robot, because they wanted, and like how they designed the transformation, you can watch on screen how the transformation happens and you see what goes where. It's very purposeful. It was really cool. And at Michael Bay's direction, the animators had to make the mass of the robot fit inside the shell of the vehicle that they turned into, because he didn't want any of that mass shifting that everybody complains about that was in the cartoon and other places. He wanted it, since it's a live action movie, somewhat realistic, he wanted our eyeballs and our brains to be happy that when we watch this vehicle transform into a robot, it makes sense. The size is similar. How we don't have more complaints when everybody complains about in a cartoon that Soundwave turns from like a 50-foot robot down to a little tape player. They'll complain about that. But I don't see anybody complaining about Mirage turning into a garbage truck. He's a Porsche 911 size robot, but he can turn into a garbage truck and nobody cares. Anyway, there's been plenty of said about the CGI and the design. I'm not going into it. How about the mediocre story? About how, just like pretty much all of the other Transformer movies that preceded it, you've got the humans that somehow become involved in this object that the good Transformers and the bad Transformers all want. And they spend the whole movie chasing down or protecting this object. Come up with something unique, please. Or, speaking of the humans, we've had enough humans. We don't need so much time spent on a human storyline in a Transformer movie. It's called Transformers. It's not called Humans and Transformers. It's not called the Transformers and the humans that love them. Stop giving so much. I don't care. I don't need the backstory of the human who's going to befriend the Transformers. All I need, you know what? Give me character development on the level of Lennox from the first 3 movies. We basically, in that first movie, we get one video chat scene where we find out he has a wife and a daughter. That's all we need to know about him. The rest, you learn from his actions and from the way he speaks. That's all I want in a human character in a Transformers movie. And there's a lot of praise in the Noah story in Rise of the Beasts, and I just don't get it. It's not necessarily an attack on the actor. I'm sure he's fine. I'm going to blame the script. Although he basically has one facial expression through the whole movie. I don't get all the praise. I don't understand it. Or the fact that the way he and Elena, I think that was her name, the way they become involved in the Transformers storyline is both basically broke into a place they weren't supposed to be and ultimately stole something that didn't belong to them. This is what we want in our human heroes? That they got on this journey by doing criminal activity? Come on. And what even is Noah's motivation? You get all of this story about his little brother that has some kind of health issue, and they can't get proper treatment because of their financial situation. And so Mirage convinces him to help them, and in exchange, Mirage will let Noah sell him for money, and that'll help pay for the brother's medical expenses. That's weird. Even if I bought into that, it kind of morphs into, like, the majority of the movie, Noah's fighting. Is he dealing with these scary horror movie-esque Transformers chasing him down the hall, and he's fighting these gigantic robots, and he's becoming Iron Man, and this is all just to get through it so he can sell a car? Or is he now trying to save the world, or at least save Brooklyn? Because if there's no Brooklyn, then there's no doctors and there's no brother, and then what's the point? I don't know. It's muddled and it's weird, and even if I did buy into it, I don't care. Anyway, there's been plenty of that online. I think, anyway, I'm not going to waste time talking about the human involvement in Transformer movies. It's been talked about to death. Or the character changes. You know, there was a ton of controversy that Mirage, who was an F1 car in the cartoon, is now a Porsche 911. Well, that's Jazz's alt mode. Really? What about the first movie? Ironhide was a red van in the cartoon. Now he's a black pickup truck. Bumblebee used to be a Volkswagen. Now he's a Camaro. Optimus Prime has flames. I know there was some complaints at the time about that, but we've all gotten used to that. So if a defender of the live-action movies, most of the time, if I'm going to be okay with the changes in the first movies, then I would be a hypocrite to complain about Mirage being an F1 car in this new movie. Although they did give us that tiny little 2-second Easter egg, I did appreciate that. Or Wheeljack becoming a van. Here's the problem with Wheeljack. I don't care that you're going to give him a new design or a new character. Dadgummit, dog. You messed up my whole thing, man. What are you doing? You don't like my yelling? The problem is, in the Bumblebee movie, you give us G1 designs. You gave us the Cybertron scenes that all these characters that we love that looked like the live-action version of the cartoon counterparts that are familiar to us, like Wheeljack. And then the very next movie, it's like that didn't even happen. You give us a completely different design, different voice, different character. He's not even a scientist anymore. He's got some goggles that at one point he used like computer glasses. The problem isn't the change in the characters. The problem is you gave us those characters in Bumblebee and then took them away. Now, I accept that the movies are set in a different universe, okay? I'm a Transformers fan. Look, I like my G1. Check this out. Look. Look at this. I like G1. Look, I even have a Beast Wars character. Look down at the bottom. I even have movie characters down there. I even have original Beast Wars Megatron down there. I am a Transformers fan. I appreciate that in the different iterations of Transformers, you have a reimagining of what the characters look like, what they act like, etc. But don't tease me with a half reboot with Bumblebee and then give us Rise of the Beast which is basically another Michael Bay movie. And speaking of characters, all these complaints, I'm not going to get into it because there's been so much said online. All these complaints about how some of the characters didn't have enough screen time or enough dialogue, especially Cheetor and Rhinox. RC had a little bit, although I did like her in this movie. Wheeljack, with all the complaints about him, he hardly did anything. I keep seeing online people excusing it and saying, well, there's too many characters, they can't spend enough time on them. Or, oh, if I see this one more time, if the movie was a half hour longer, then they'd be able to... Bull crap! We live in a post-Avengers world. Not even just Avengers, a post-Infinity Saga world, where we've had Civil War, we've had Endgame and Infinity whatever, where we have been given movies with like 40 or 50 characters, and each character gets some amount of screen time so that we care about these characters. We know something about them, and we have feelings towards them. Don't tell me. So the problem isn't that this movie needed to be longer. You had like, what, 8 characters? The problem isn't the length of the movie, the problem is the writing. Speaking of reboots, there's been so much debate online about whether Rise of the Beasts is a reboot. How is this a debate about if Rise of the Beasts is a reboot or not? It's not a reboot, it's a sequel to Bumblebee. Now, when Bumblebee was coming, before it came out, there was a lot of debate, rightly so, about whether Bumblebee was going to be a reboot or not. And it was so confusing because one producer says something and the director says something else. Yeah, is this a reboot or not? They didn't even know what they were doing. That is not a reboot, what we got. What we got is, actually, first we got a tease of a reboot with the Cybertron scenes, but the Bumblebee movie was not a reboot. It was the same universe, but a different timeline, okay? Call it whatever you want. Call it a soft reboot. It's not a reboot. Hollywood uses a different term or a different definition of reboot than us peasants do. Rise of the Beasts is a direct sequel to Bumblebee. That means Rise of the Beasts is not a reboot. Stop arguing about whether or not it's a reboot. You remember Tobey Maguire when he played Spider-Man in 3 movies, right? And then that was rebooted into The Amazing Spider-Man. You had completely different actors, different characters, a completely different origin story, a different design of the suit. That is a reboot. You know what I would like? I would like an actual reboot. A Transformers reboot. And you know what? Call me a G1 or all you want. But this cartoon is what started it all. It's the whole reason we have Transformers in the first place. And you know what? I don't care what you say about it. There were great characters in that cartoon, and there were really good storylines in that cartoon. So if they wanted to, they could use that as inspiration, and they could do an actual, like, fresh new movie, more in line with what a live-action Transformers movie would be. And yeah, you know what? Keep the same characters that are in the cartoon. Make Optimus Prime look like that, and make Starscream look like that, and make Mirage look like that. Because you know what? Let me give you something. Think about this. Take the Ninja Turtles, right? Everybody knows the Ninja Turtles. There have been numerous cartoons, books, movies. It has been rebooted so many times. And you know what you have every time? You have 4, well, maybe with one exception when they added a girl. But for the most part, you have 4 turtles. And for the most part, they are always Leonardo the leader, Raphael the fighter, Michelangelo the cut-up, and Donatello the scientist. And normally you even have the same colors, blue, red, orange, purple, because those are the Ninja Turtles. Those are the characters that we know from that 1980s cartoon. It's the characters we love, and every time it's rebooted, those are the 4 characters we get. So why can't we give the same respect to my beloved Transformers? And let Optimus be a good leader, doggone it. I'm so sick. You know, there's a lot online of discussions about Optimus and his war crimes, so-called, in the live-action movies. Maybe I can kind of agree with it. He is brutal in the live-action movies. It was a complaint of Michael Bay's Optimus, right? Give me your face. So then everybody was hoping for a more familiar Optimus in Rise of the Beasts. And guess what we got? Well, partly, we got the same angry, bitter, I'm going to rip off your face, Optimus Prime. Nobody seems to care. Everybody loves this one more, even though he's the same brutal, violent, angry Optimus Prime in the previous live-action movies. But now you add in his insecurities and his self-doubt, and he feels so bad about leaving Cybertron, and what does this do? He's wishy-washy, so his soldiers don't know if they can follow him or not. Give me the Optimus Prime from the cartoon, not just because I'm a G1er, not just because of nostalgia purposes, but because he's a good leader. He knows what he believes in, he knows what's right and wrong, and he will stand for what's right, and his soldiers follow him because they trust him and they respect him. That's the leader I want to see in Optimus Prime in a live-action movie. And I know you have to have some amount of conflict for the sake of story. That's fine. Have a character that doesn't know if he trusts Optimus Prime. Whatever. Even the cartoon did that. But for the most part, give me a good leader. Anyway, there's been plenty said already about all of that. I'm not going to add to it. What I would like to talk about, the purpose of this video, is the vulgarity. This is supposed to be a kids movie, not necessarily a kids movie, but it is a movie that should be made to be viewed by a younger audience. I mean, it's made to sell toys anyways, right? That's the whole purpose of Transformers since the very beginning. It's a show or a movie or whatever, a book for kids to fall in love with and then have their parents buy the toys, right? So a parent should be comfortable bringing the kids to the movie. Now, this has not changed since the Michael Bay movies. Those were just as vulgar. Actually, more so. There's a lot of complaints online. Those movies are infamous for their stupid sex jokes. I get it. I agree with it. It's way too much. But I would argue Mirage's joke in this movie pushed the line even further. It was pretty vulgar. And yes, it was one joke compared to 30, but even still, how do we complain about the sex jokes in a Michael Bay movie, but then we laugh at the one in Rise of the Beast? It's hypocritical. And not only that, the cussing. Again, no change from the Michael Bay movies. There was plenty of cussing in those too. But I was hoping with Bumblebee, especially with his new design, he looks younger and cuter, more appealing to kids. I was hoping that with Bumblebee and now with Rise of the Beasts, we would have fewer cuss words that my kids would hear when I bring them to the theater like an ignorant parent. Well, guess what? That is not the case. I think actually, if you went back and counted, there's probably more cuss words in Rise of the Beasts than there was in Bumblebee. I don't know if that's true, but it felt that way. Bumblebee, with his stupid movie quotes that he says, I think he had more cuss words in his recordings than he did in previous movies. I've never heard Bumblebee cuss so much. I'd say he has to wash out his mouth, but he doesn't really have one. What else was I going to say? And then RC. I didn't even catch this. My daughter told me. She pointed out that in that stupid scene where she's hanging on the minivan door and the missile flies by the way, continuity error, that year model of Volkswagen van did not have a sliding door on the left side. So that's not even realistic that he opened the left door to let the missile go through. Stupid movie. I could give him a little bit of credit. He's a Transformer. He can morph his body. Maybe he made a door appear in the van. I don't know. But as that missile went by, apparently she mouthed the F word Come on, man, it's a kid's movie. Stop with the cuss words. This is a trend that Marvel has been pushing, and it's turning me off of them, too. You remember Ultron when a big deal was made because Iron Man said one S word? Now, gee whiz, you see any Marvel TV show or movie, guaranteed there's going to be at least 10. The trend needs to end. I understand societies change or whatever. I don't like it. There's too much profanity. We give too much to the kids. Anyway, was that it? Yeah. That's all I wanted to say about the movie. It was just too vulgar for me. I do want to be fair to the movie, though. Like I said, it wasn't all bad. I did enjoy a lot of the movie. So, I want to be fair, and I want to talk about some positives in the movie, too. There were a lot of really cool transformations. Anyway, I know there's a lot of opinions about these movies, and about this movie in particular, and we don't all have to agree, but this was my take on the movie. But what do I know? I'm just a film twit.